We're
You did
live.
it.
Hey, everybody. My name's Brad Montgomery. Say hi to Eric Smith. Eric Smith, say yo.
How's it going?
That was not you. We're in about 5 minutes. We're gonna go live. I'm gonna interview this guy, Eric, all about the. We're gonna hold his feet to the fire. Asking him all the awkward questions I've wanted to ask the Reverend Doctor. But we got 5 minutes to kill, and I want to ask him a little bit about his kids. So, Eric, what's up with your family during the pandemic?
I feel like my kids are living their best life, right? They get to do pretty much exactly what they want to do, which is lounge around. I've got two of them that don't really change out of their pajamas ever, and they
That's your
like they
wife or you?
my kid, well, my kids, they'll like change out of their daytime pajamas into their nighttime pajamas, but it's always pajamas, and they just like for most of the day we'll watch something or play something, or sometimes we make them go on a walk or something like that, but it's not such a bad life for them at this point. They're doing all right.
And so we read so much about parents struggling with having their kids around. So is that real?
Well, I'm at my office right now
Oh wait,
because
here's Jenny saying hi. Okay,
oh
Jenny,
yeah,
I see you.
what's up, Jenny?
Jenny works with Eric. Jenny also has
Jenny,
been disregarding my calls and emails. Just
Jenny is
saying.
Eric's boss.
Before we go back to your kids, in 4 minutes we're going to interview this guy who's a minister and a smarty pants and a generally nice guy, and we're going to ask him what it's like to be behind the scenes in his job as a reverend. So, Eric, we interrupted you. I got excited with Jenny's comment. Tell me more.
Well, yeah, so like um, I think having my kids around is great, and it's a blessing, and it's really wonderful, and we're spending a lot more time together than we would otherwise get to spend in most, like everyday normal life. But it's also, I think, kind of a bummer for them. They feel like they don't get to see their friends, so
Right.
it's that same weirdness I think that everyone's living through. That we're seeing like a lot of each other. Like I saw somebody on Twitter say like no one's gonna resign to spend more time with their family right now, right? Like we're all getting plenty of family time, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's always a suspect thing anyway. Like, Eric Smith has decided to retire to spend more time with his family. It's always suspect, but now he'd be like, bullshit, right? Instantly.
Right.
You just
That's
know
not
that's
what you're
wrong.
doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are you finding yourself being a crappy parent? Meaning, I don't. It's not as loaded a question as you think. I find myself pretty short when I snap at the kids more than I would like to, and I do that generally. But during the pandemic, I totally do it. What's it like? You're a man of God. How does that work?
So yeah, I think parenting like is a really brutal mirror that gets held up to yourself, right? Like because you get to see who you really are in a lot of ways, and it's not flattering. And so parenting right now, for me anyway, is more intense and more like that than even normal times,
Hmm.
right? So um, I'm not always the person I would like to think I am. I'm short with them. I snap at them. I wish they would just, clean up their cereal bowl, and they just can't. I don't. It's whatever about them. They just don't. They can't. They're not capable. So that little things like that become more frustrating in the echo chamber that is our lives right now.
Right.
We're all locked in together.
Well, my kids, Eric, are older than yours. You have cute little. You have medium-sized kids. I have big kids.
Medium.
You used to have
Yeah.
tiny kids. Now you have medium kids. Um, my kids are all in their 20s. No cereal bowls get put away.
No.
Okay, yes, they do. They do. Just there's one particular kid.
You're not gonna
Let's.
name names. All right.
No, there's one sitting over there helping me out. It's not her. That's for sure. Yeah, well, I think when the kids get older, they find different ways to make you crazy.
So I've heard.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
I hear
think
that.
mine are in the perfect kind of range where like they're people now, and they have personalities. And like my oldest one, for example, is just nerdy in a lot of the same kind of ways I am, which is so gratifying. It's like there's just like another like uh, I don't know, I've spawned, and there's another one of me out there, and he's like so into Star Trek right now, and also he discovered that the Beatles exist, and we had this long conversation the other day about how Narnia and Star Wars and Harry Potter worlds are all like the same world,
Same
and Lord of
thing,
the
yeah.
Rings, so it's kind of cool to see them become people in their own kind of way.
It is. There are so many things I liked about that sentence. First of all, you open the word geek, so that means I can call you a geek. Nice. And you use the word
I think I said
spawn.
nerd.
Oh, you said nerd? I can't. All right.
Yeah.
I don't. Either way, they're kind
Potato,
of geeky.
potato.
If you're just tuning in, my name is Brad Montgomery with Reverend Dr. Eric Smith is in the house. And in about 30 seconds, we're going to start the real interview. And that's where we get to find out what it's like to really be the guy who stands up on the stage. It's not this, Eric, what's it called? When you're standing in front of the church, what is that called?
There's a pulpit.
Pulpit, right. When you're up on the pulpit, we're going to find out what it's like kind of behind the scenes.
Cancel.
I want to ask him if he's, because, in church, he seems a little bit smarter than the rest of us. And we are there. Let me take this off. Hey, everybody, Brad Montgomery. It is happening. First of all, thanks for coming. Have you washed your hands? Second of all, it's your chance to ask questions to a guy, and maybe through the internet we can do it anonymously, so we can make the questions awkward. I'm teasing, but this is Eric Smith. He's I'm proud to go to the same church as Eric. He's the guy who stands up in front. I think you're called associate. What's your official job title, Eric?
At the church, I'm teaching minister, so not an associate, but just like I have this little sliver of things that I do, which is mostly teaching.
All right, yeah, but you're also in front of the audience.
Yeah.
And how often are you doing that? I think it's a monthly-ish.
Yeah, that's about right.
All right. So
I'm doing it Sunday. If you want to tune in.
How many books
Sunday.
have you written, Mr. Smarty Pants?
3.5 at this point.
Oh, that half one is that's the shorter one. I'll start there.
It's looming.
Oh, I just put something on there. All right,
it's going to be due.
Here's the biggest question I've been dying to ask you. I've been doing this type of interview with some of my peers who are motivational speakers, Eric. And it kind of goes like this. We all feel like we're supposed to have our stuff together, and we feel as though our audiences project things upon us. And that includes maybe that we are a little bit more together than the average person. And maybe we are, since we talk about positivity, we're always able to be more positive. And we're just, when I'm on stage, I'm a more perfect version of myself than I really am. And I'm really curious what it's like in your life generally, because I know, because I've been there. We project, when you're up there, we're like, this guy's amazing. I just wonder what that's like. And in particular, now that we're in quarantine and pandemic and the news of the protests and, life is freaking, complicated right now. That's a euphemism, right? So, what's it like to be you when we're looking at you for the wisdom? And I'm wondering if you always have it for yourself.
I don't always have it for myself, right? So it's a strange time. It's a strange thing because there is this feeling, right, that you're supposed to stand up and say something, and that it should be worthwhile when you do that, and that there's something that you should leave people with in that sermon or whatever it is, and it's not always possible. And there's a real tension in that. There's this guy who was a member of the same church as us who died a few years back, Larry Graham, who was a fairly famous pastoral care scholar. And he talked a lot about this thing called moral stress, right? Which is, moral stress is when you've got this ideal and you've got the lived reality of it. And the distance between those, the tension between those is where it's really hard to live your life. And so soldiers feel this a lot, right? Where they want to be doing the right noble thing, but they're also put in these situations where they got to do terrible things.
All right.
So for me, right, like living in the world we're living in right now, there's a lot of terrible crap going on in our world. And yet we're somehow called to be hopeful and give a word of inspiration. And it's hard to live in that tension because you don't always feel hopeful. You don't always feel inspired. And you don't always know what the right thing to say is, even if you could, say it, you don't even know what to tell people. So for me, there's a lot of stress in that and a lot of tension because you don't have it together. And
right.
Even what people expect you to say, it's hard to.
But how does that
deliver.
Me too. And how does that stress manifest for you? You said there's a lot of stress. Yeah. What's that like?
Well, I think a lot of people are feeling a lot of stress right now, like embodied stress. Like they're feeling exhausted, they're feeling burned out and worn out, and you can only be like on guard so much for so long until um, you're overwhelming all your systems. So for me, like I just feel tired all the time, um, all the time. I was telling you earlier, I was just napping this afternoon, which wasn't a thing that was a part of my everyday life, 6 months ago. But now, often I find myself I just have to lay down because I'm physically exhausted. So, um, and if at the same time that feels like a privilege, it is a privilege,
Right.
and it feels like a surrender to the world. Um, but we can't fight them all, right?
Yeah, it feels like, I think the problem with napping is it feels like this is a dirty thing. Like, how's your work ethic? But now it seems like now, dang it, we need
Yeah,
more naps, right? I wish I could nap. Well, one of the things that troubles me, Eric, is I just put this pressure on myself to be, oh, Brad, you're the most positive guy in the room because it says you are on your website. and
yeah.
and clearly I'm not that way. And in the past 3 months, I'm totally not that way. Well, I have my moments, but wait for one more moment. Is that something you put yourself under, that sort of pressure? Because I know in your family, or like, how does that work for you?
Well, you're right. So you're a professional happy guy,
Hmm.
right? That's your job is you go in and be happy. And sometimes ministers think of themselves as professional Christians, or actually more frequently people think of ministers as professional Christians.
Right.
And you're just righteous all the time, and that's sort of your job description. And that's not at all what it is. It's if you see that happening, it's a performance and it's a show,
Right.
which is an important part of the job, right? But it's actually not the reality most of the time. So for me, the tension is how do I speak authentically and say something's true from my own experience, but also present some sort of good news, to use a Christian term.
Well, it's funny you were talking about you're a professional righteous guy or Christian guy. I think that's hilarious because one of the things I've talked about with my speaker friends is motivational speaker a personality type, or is it a job description? And so here's the question for you. You kind of hinted. Seems like minister sounds like a personality type, but I'm just really eager to hear like what it's like behind the scenes.
Well, so my other job, which is where I'm sitting right now, is I teach at a seminary, which is like a graduate school for ministers in training. So you see like the full range of people who go through the process of wanting to become a minister. And I think what I've learned from that is that there's not like one type. Um, but if there's a tendency or a leaning, they tend to be really inwardly turned people, not on stage kind of people. So I don't know if that's true for your line of work, but it's ironic, I think, that often the people that churches want to get to stand up on the stage and say something are the ones least inclined to do so, and the ones for whom it takes the most energy to do that, right? So I'm that way. I'm very introverted. It
Right.
takes everything in the world. And if you ask all these people watching, go out and ask your minister friends what they do on Sunday afternoon after church, they take a nap because it's exhausting. And just being on stage like that, you have to really draw more resources than you have often.
When you were coming up, were you looking forward to the preaching part, or were you dreading that?
Dreading it. Yeah.
So why in the hell are you a minister? So
I
what?
don't know.
That seems like the best part. You're in front of the audience and they're saying like, "Eric, give it to me," and you get to lay it out. Oops, I
They're
just
not
bumped
always
my mic.
saying that.
Well, yeah, we
You're
are.
like,
When we're in the audience, we're like, I don't want a mediocre sermon. I want you to light it on fire.
well, and I think it's possible that you're not the median churchgoer, right? So
No.
um, a lot of people are not doing that. A lot of people are sitting there kind of grumpy, and maybe not unlike when you have a motivational speaking, I don't know what you call that, engagement. Not everyone wants to be there. Some people have other things they'd rather be doing. And so that's the same thing with church. One of the things I enjoy about Colorado, I'm from the South originally, is in Colorado, uh, more or less people who show up at church want to be there. In the South, people who show up at church are there because they're brother-in-law kind of force them into it, or they feel like their boss needs to see them there or something like that. In Colorado, it's different, and people are often curious to hear what you have to say, but it's really, it's also just not about that always. It's not about saying what, even if people want to hear something, you might not want to say that thing to them. You might want to tell a different truth, right? That they are not prepared to hear. And that's where it can get really messy or difficult, is when you have to say something because, to use theological language, God has called you to say a thing that won't be popular, that people don't want to hear. And that can be another source of stress. And right now, there's all kinds of ministers out there struggling, with the question of, do I say Black Lives Matter from the pulpit and get things thrown at me? Do I take sides on what some people will think of as a political issue, or do I be quiet and keep my job, or keep my job simple anyway?
Cleverly, I'm backing away from that political question and the Black Lives Matter question. But can you walk us back one? Sometimes you need to say things that we don't expect, or we don't want to hear. Can you, without getting in the weeds too much, what are you talking about?
Well, maybe, I don't know if, since you've backed away from Black Lives Matter.
Well, I'm just afraid. I'm kind of afraid on my social media to have my politics out there too much.
Well, there you go. So now you know what it's like, right, to be a minister. But that's the tension, right? If you think Black Lives Matter, which I do, and you're not sure everyone's going to want to hear that, then you have a decision to make. And for me, it's a theological statement. It's not a political statement. I'm not aligning with this or that, but it's a thing that I think is true, and therefore a thing that I should say out loud. And it's going to piss a lot of people off, right? And that's a tension. So I don't know if, here's maybe where the roads diverge. I don't think, your job description is to say that kind of uncomfortable thing to your audiences, but for me, I feel like it is. And that's where a lot of the rub comes.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. Because I feel like in front of my audiences are typically business audiences, or corporations, or a hospital or something. And so that means the audience is even more diverse. And also my job is to get them from A to B, because someone paid me to do that. And if I stand up and say I like red hats and not blue hats, or whatever, then I lose people. It's like I'm giving myself a handicap. But I feel like yours is different, because your audience has sort of self-selected. If they come to your church, they're hoping for your flavor of ice cream. And if I think if we go to a church, aren't we expecting a flavor of ice cream, as opposed to Brad Montgomery, who's like, vanilla? I don't know. That's all I got.
Sometimes you come to a church because you grew up in that church, and it's your church, and the minister might have been there for 5 years, but you've been there for 55 years, right? So it's not always that people have selected based on the ideology. Sometimes it's just where they go, or it's in their neighborhood, or it's just where their spouse wants to go. And so there is sometimes a gap between the flavors. What they're expecting vanilla, but they get, one time at a restaurant, I got Szechuan peppercorn ice cream. It looked just like vanilla. It was a really different experience. So if you're expecting one thing and you get another, then
I hear you.
That's the shock of it all, I think.
Along these lines, see if this sounds familiar to you. So do you follow comedy at all? Do you ever watch comedy on Netflix, for example?
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle?
Of course.
All right. Well, I love this guy partly because he doesn't hold anything back. He is the furthest thing from vanilla. He has this thing I want and I will never have. People go to Dave Chappelle because they know Dave Chappelle and they expect him to say everything. And he has enough clout and celebrity that he says, one, you got to pay money to come and see me. And two, give me your darn phone. They lock up people's phones so they can't videotape him and put up something on social media out of context. Mm-hmm. And he's just like out there, and I crave that. I so want to be in a place where I could stand in front of an audience or even a camera and say, dang it, here's what I believe. And if you don't believe it, I think you're stupid.
Yeah. And sometimes you're watching Dave Chappelle. yeah, sometimes I watch Dave Chappelle and I'm like, you should not say that out loud, right?
Right.
Um, but I think he's in the truth telling business is how he sees it, and that's what I understand about comedy. You know, I don't know a lot about comedy, certainly not as much as you, but that's my understanding of it is that it's about telling truth and and about the sort of edge of uncomfortable that comes with truth sometimes, which is not all that different, I think, from the line of work I'm in. It's telling truth, even when it kind of people wish you would shut up about it.
So how close are you? If here's plain vanilla way over here, and then all the way on the other side is Dave Chappelle, where is Eric Smith when you're talking in front of the church?
Well, the church that you and I attend, First Plymouth Congregational Church, is I can be pretty authentic there. There are other churches that I would be less free, I guess.
Right.
But at First Plymouth, I'm pretty able to at least say what I think, even if people get angry about it. You know, they're gonna know that I'm doing my job the best I can and kind of accept it. And a lot of
Are
people will be
you
on the
all the
same
way over
page.
here?
I'm like, I mean, I don't know how to do a scale that starts with vanilla and ends with
How
Dave
about how
Chappelle, but
about 1 to 10? 10 is oops. Where there we go. One to
I'm like
10.
I'm like eight,
Oh, you're
you
pretty
know,
far.
eight
Yeah.
probably. Yeah. But other churches, you know, I'd be at even at other churches where I've worked or have spoken, 4 or 5, you
Yeah, I
know.
get it. You got to dial it back. What's a weird thing is I think in both of our jobs they don't want us to be a cardboard cutout, right? We don't. They don't. They want to feel like they met a human they're watching either one of us, and so there is that bizarre balance of they really want to know us at the same time. I don't want to tell them everything because I'm afraid I'm going to either lose somebody because they'll say, well, if he, dang it, he just said he likes pistachio ice cream and I hate pistachio ice cream, so I'm out. Eric, I think we've worked this metaphor too far. But,
Yeah.
but I'm terrified. I just don't want to be that far. On the other hand, they really want to know us, and it's a bizarre problem.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my question is why not? Why don't you want to lose someone?
Well, because typically my companies or my clients are companies. So they say, Brad, come in and take our audience from A to B. And if I take them to C, they're saying that's not what we wanted.
Right.
And because I'm not a celebrity like Dave Chappelle, they're not buying me to be me. They're buying me as a service to take their people. So
Hmm.
at least it feels like I'm not serving my clients if I do that. Just to say, like, I don't care what you believe. Here's what I believe. I do get to do that with some things, like when it comes to my take on positivity and my take on, in many ways, how to live our lives. But when it comes to, and also how to interact with individual humans, when it comes to
Hmm.
interacting with larger groups of humans, for example, politics, I I do everything I can to stay out of that because I don't want to lose them.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah. In ministry, we call that the tension between the prophetic and the pastoral, right? You can get up and say everything you think is true, and that would be really prophetic, but that would not be the most pastoral thing. Like you would hurt some people, maybe even if you think they need to be hurt a little bit, but you would hurt them, and that's also part of your job description is to not hurt them. So
I
there's
agree.
always a tension. Yeah.
All right, let me take another stab at this. What it's like to be you. I have noticed. Here's a freaking conversation I have with speakers. When we're on stage, we got our stuff together because we've rehearsed, right? I know what I don't do what I'm doing now. I don't stumble over a sentence. I've just got it.
Hmm.
Um, and so then when people come up to me afterwards, so I'm no longer on stage and are interacting with me, they have projected a little bit of awesomeness on me that is odd. And so earlier in my career, I used to totally deflect and go like, "Oh no, I'm just one. I'm exactly like you." And one of my mentors told me, "Brad, stop that. If people project upon you, that's what they're just projecting whatever they need, and you don't even know what they're projecting. So just shut up and take it, and be that person for them. And then your job is when you go back to your kids, try to be Brad again and not whatever you think they're seeing in you." I'm guessing that happens to you all the time. You mentioned people see you as a professional Christian, professional. What did you call it? Just person,
Yeah, something like righteous person or something.
right? So that means if I see you in the grocery store or I see you after church or whatever here on Skype, I already think things about you. Do you ever say, "Oh no, come on, stop it," or do you just let them say, "I guess that's what they need right now"?
Well, I don't think, in my case, very many people are going around with any illusions that I'm a professional righteous person, right? I'm not especially righteous in some of those ways. But there are people who really, often they're people who grew up with like really hierarchical religion, right? That the priest or whoever was like really important and untouchable, and they want to project that onto you. And I do kind of deflect that because I don't want that, and I don't actually think it's true. I don't think ministers are categorically different from anyone else, or should be thought of that way. So I do kind of deflect it, partly because I don't think it's accurate, right? But that's an interesting question. Like, what is the function of kind of the, not quite a leader, but like the figurehead? Is it to be their own person or say their own thing, or is it to reflect something back to people? That's an interesting question that I hadn't thought about.
I hear you. By the way, we have a cool question from Whitney. Hi, Whitney. Give us a second. I'll get to it. But let me give you an example. Let's say I'm in a place of need. So I do whatever I do to call up Eric and say, I need to see a reverend. And so we meet, and I'm looking, I don't want my neighbor or just some guy who's a dad. I want a freaking reverend. And so, because I want your wisdom. So how, in that place, it feels to me like you should allow me to, or your people to project awesomeness on you because, isn't that your job? I don't, if like, let's say I'm dying or I'm struggling or whatever. I want you to be this together guy.
Yeah, that's the part of the job I'm really not good at. There are people who are much better at it than I am. The sort of pastoral part, and but I think my answer would be, if that time came, I would hope that we have a relationship that allows us to be just authentic with each other. And what really I think people are after is presence with another person and presence with God. And if in that moment, I would hope to offer something like that you're being present. And that's what they're after more than a particular, proximity to a person or a role. What they want is connection and presence. But I'm not good at that, so I don't know.
I'm dying to know what makes you say you're not good at it.
Just
oh, your coworker Jenny is saying, yeah, you're definitely average. Jenny,
that's true. Yeah,
she's
hit the nail on the head. Yeah, and it's just not my thing, right? There's other things I'm good at, but that's not one of them. But there are people who are really brilliant at that, and hospital chaplains are amazing people. They can walk into a room they've never met you before and make you feel at ease and make you feel at home and comforted. And that's certainly a role that a lot of people feel. It's just not the one I'm really good at. Now, people do ask me to be a part of their life in really kind of tender moments, which I'm very honored to do. And it's a real privilege to get to do that kind of stuff. And I'm glad to do it. But it's not the kind of thing I go out seeking because I feel like there are people who are better at that than I am.
Okay, question. This is good. I'm sure you've experienced this, especially when you're dressed up and you got your thing on, your stole or whatever. If you give a compliment as Reverend Dr. Eric Smith, my guess is people receive that with greater authority than if you're just some guy in the grocery store saying, hey, pass me that apple. Thanks, you're great at passing apples. Right? In your job, you've got some oomph, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
And that's weird.
No, but it's happening though, right?
Yeah.
So why not just own that and say like, whatever, especially when you're using that power for good. If someone says, that guy just told me whatever, I did a good job. If it means more from the guy with the stole, then why not just be that guy with the stole?
Well, and I do think that's true, that sometimes you speak out of the stole or whatever, right? With a different kind of authority. And that's a good thing. But there's an interesting question of like, where does that authority come from? Is it coming from you as a human being? Is it coming from your position? And there are all sorts of ethical questions, I think, around when you speak out of your sort of position in office. What are the boundaries there? And so for me, you're supposed to tell the truth. in those moments. So it's not self-glorifying. It's not, but tell the truth as best you can when you have those opportunities. I don't know.
Well, I wish I had the answer. I'd give it to you if I could. My gut tells
Me
me,
too.
Eric, that politely, that this would be a fun part of your job. If the premise, the thing that I just assume is that when you give, for example, a bit of encouragement, it means more coming from you because of who you are, meaning your background and your education and your job. So if that's true, you're not even close to ethical issues or religious issues by just saying like, I'm going to share that positivity because it really seems to have a little bit more oomph.
Yeah. When I was in evangelical culture, which is a whole other conversation, often people would say, I'm going to speak the truth in love to you, Brad, which is a kind of a roundabout way to say, I'm going to tell you something really mean,
Ooh.
but I'm going to wrap it up in, piety. So I think, I completely agree. And this is one of the things I really admire about you is that you're very generous with your positivity, and you're very complimentary often. And I think that's exactly right. There are ways to use one's position to do that. But I think there's also another side to that where you have to be careful with it, because if you speak the truth in love to someone, sometimes that's just being mean.
Right, but I can't see you going up and saying, "Honey, I need to speak the truth and love or in love,
Yeah.
in love with you." I just can't see you doing that. Because I assume the other side of that sword is if you're hard on somebody, it also means more. Meaning you could do damage easier than somebody who's not you. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the other side. Like, oh man, you killed it today. Great job. They go,
Yeah.
did you hear what Eric
That's
said?
really awkward. I mean, so I don't know, maybe different churches do it different ways, but at our church, if we ever get to go back to the building again, you give a sermon, you do the whole service, then you go out in the hallway and people line up to tell you that, right? And they're like, "Oh, good job, Reverend." And it's awkward and weird, and I've never gotten used to it, right? Even if I think it's true, although sometimes, the ones I think are the best job are the ones no one really, they're just like, "Oh, see you next Sunday." And sometimes the ones that I think are terrible, people really appreciate. So you just never know. And for me, that's why I never try to internalize it too much when people, because they are, as you said earlier, kind of projecting things onto you. And sometimes it's about you and often it's not.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Because I hear you saying, one, you're uncomfortable with that, with like the people walk in line and shake your hand and want to give you a compliment. But also, I hear you saying that it doesn't mean much because it's not even about Eric.
I'm not, I guess I'm not trying to say it doesn't mean much. I'm saying I wish it didn't mean very much.
I
Because
wish
you
it.
do hear those things, right? Like you hear in the same way, I think it probably matters to you, the reviews that your employers would give of you. But, but at the same time, those reviews don't always reflect you, and there's more going on in any of those interactions. Right. So when people say, "Oh, that was really wonderful," sometimes they mean that was really wonderful, and sometimes they mean I'm sure glad to be here today, and sometimes they mean this is what my mother taught me to do when I was 6, and so now I'm going to keep doing it. And sometimes they mean I sure do dislike the other person who does this on a regular basis, and so I'm going to say nice things to you to kind of stick it to them. Right. So there's all kinds of motivations for those kind of compliments, and to me, I try not to live and die by them.
It's funny because we started this conversation. I told you this came from one of my mentors. It is exactly this time. So for our jobs, I walk off the stage and people are filing out, going to the next bit of the conference. And then there's always a small number of people who elect to come and say hi and whatever. And with your job, it's part of the gig, right? You stand in a particular place and people have to walk past you. But that's the time when I was talking to my friend. Oh, Leanne, isn't this so weird that they do that? And I'm just obviously just like them, only I practice more for that one thing I did. So I was
Well,
just
so
saying, and she
imagine,
said, Brad, shame on you. You got to own that. And if they see that, give them that time, and then lose it by the time you hit the parking lot. But be that guy for that moment.
but do you think Dave Chappelle stands at the door to the theater and like hears everyone say, "Oh, Dave, that was really magnificent"? Or, that'd be weird, right? If he did that, if everyone just got to line up and tell Dave what they thought.
Why? Why would that be weird? Because I would love to say that. Oh, Dave, I think you're the greatest. I would make me so happy to do that. To
Yeah,
say it to him.
yeah, yeah. But I think there's also people who would really get off on like taking that opportunity to not be complimentary, right? I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but it's a weird
I don't
dynamic.
either.
Is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Well, it's just okay. Here's another story. I went and saw at a jazz club here in Denver called Dazzle a hero to me, a piano player named Monty Alexander, and I grew up listening to his albums. And so here I am in my 50s, and I got to say this thing that must have sounded like drivel to him. Monty Alexander, because of you, I love jazz. I've followed you for decades. Like I've bought your albums over and over and over and over again. And he could have just gone like, "Oh my God, I hear this crap all the time. Dinner's waiting for me." But he didn't. He looked me in the eyes and he connected with me and he made me feel like $1,000,000, even though I know by the time he got to the hotel, he didn't remember me at all. But it felt so good to me to him just to stand there and take it and nod and ask a follow-up question and whatever. It was so cool for me, and that's what I'm. That's what I think people want from you, Eric. From us, they want like, Eric, I love that I just connected with you, and they just want you to go like, I'm here for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I guess I try to do the same thing. Like, oh, thank you so much. That was really kind of you. But you're never going to be like, yeah, you're right.
I killed it.
Yeah,
I was smoking. How'd you like that fourth paragraph? Nailed it.
that's right.
Hey, I know we're running out of time, but Whitney's got a great one. Let me see if I get this right. Here, Whitney says, "How do you handle speaking the truth with youth?" All right, Whitney, let's have it.
Well, I don't know if you know Whitney, but Whitney is like you, a parent of some people who've come through the youth group program that I have that I run at First Plymouth. And so my answer is that with youth, it's always really easy. Youth are magnificent at sniffing out BS, right? They know when you're lying to them, and they know when someone is not telling the truth or when they're being false in some way. And so it's easy to speak the truth to them because they're already so attuned to it. And yeah, I think they already know it before they ask. And what it is when they are hearing truth from you is a test to see if you're willing to say it out loud.
Oh,
Right. That's why I love working with youth. There's no guile with them. They're who they appear to be, which is not always, pleasant, but it's always real. Not always, but often it's real.
what do you think, Whitney? How do you do, Whitney? Thumbs up? Is he there?
There's a kind of, I guess he's sort of a Christian motivational speaker. He's a theologian and activist named Shane Claiborne. He had this quote a long time ago where he said, the church has often thought that what you need to do with youth is to kind of tell them a story. But what youth want is they want you to dare them with the truth of the world and kind of, tell them that the world is the way they have noticed that it is. And that's what they're after. And that's been my experience, right? Is that they are ready to hear that. And part of the job is helping them to encounter the world and all of its good and all of its bad.
I'd be disappointed if he didn't quote somebody. Just saying, you nailed it.
There you go.
There was a home run. Eric, we're going to
You
close
could
up, but
quote
I want to ask you for a favor. I am, and I suspect many of the people watching this video are right. We're exhausted, just like you said. We're overwhelmed, and the fact that we don't know what's happening next is upsetting, and the fact that we're worried about that is upsetting. And this, and could you give us some hope? Like what do you see out of this, and how can you help me sleep better tonight? Like, what would you?
Well,
you're good at this. You've read everything. What do you got for us?
so my day job is teaching history, basically. And what I learned from history is we've been here before, right? This is not our first time through a time of turmoil and a time of difficulty. And we've, not us maybe, but we in the broad sense have come through difficult times before and made it to the other side. And there are lessons from that of sort of perseverance and hope and and solidarity and working to make the world a more just place that I think we need to learn in this moment. But it's not the first time that the world has fallen apart around people. And we find ourselves in that moment now, and it's sort of, we drew those cards and that's the world we're going to live through for a little while. But there's people walking with us who have done it before. And I take comfort in that.
That was a good answer.
There you go. That's not how I feel.
Wait,
right? Like,
what?
But personally, I still have to take a nap every day, right? I still have to come home and like, oh my God, I can't even like walk anymore. I'm so exhausted. And so I think both can be true at the same time, that it's debilitating. It's exhausting. The world we live in is absurd and difficult in all the ways, but it's also true that we're going to get through it and that there's hopefulness in that. And we have to hold those two things in tension with each other.
Amen, brother. See what I did there? Did you see
that?
I
do.
Little amen. Eric, we got to do this again because one thing I really wanted to ask you about, but we already took too much of your time, is I wanted to talk about the onstage part of being a minister, compare that to my experience as a comedian and a speaker. So if I ask really nice, will you come back in the future and let's talk about the stage stuff?
Sounds like a good time.
All right. Everybody, if you're still listening to this, you're nutty, but I appreciate you. Please do me a favor, and the Facebook measures this stuff. So if you hit like and you hit hit share, that really helps me. I'm trying to build an audience here, so if you'd be willing to help me out, that helps. Every little interaction, every comment, every heart, every one of these, that helps. Eric, any last words, buddy?
Tune in on Sunday morning, 10 o'clock Mountain Time. I'm going to be preaching at First Plymouth Congregational Church on YouTube Live. So look us up.
It's firstplymouthchurch.org, right?
That's right. Yep.
Firstplymouthchurch.org. All right, right on. Eric.
It's been a pleasure.
Say hi to your family, would you?
I would.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Same to you.
Thanks, everybody.